Hey, this is Nick Milavoy.
And this is Jason Shadrick.
And this is the 100 Guitarists podcast, where each week we talk about one of the 100 guitar players that we think you should know. This week,
all-timer,
with a special guest to talk about Joni Mitchell.
Yes, we have Taylor Goldsmith from the band Dawes, who's an excellent guitar player, excellent songwriter, but also is kind of in Joni's musical inner circle, if you will. Yeah. He's done the Joni Jams. He's done the jams both at the House and the Gorge, and Newport. So he has seen Queen Joni up close. So
he's got some insight that way. He's also just a big fan who has thought about this stuff quite a bit.
Yeah,
and has a lot of cool things to say.
Dig it. All right, you can get at us at 100guitarists@premierguitar.com. Send us an email. Let us know what you think. Who should we cover? What did we miss? Or you can, if you like to speak your mind a bit more, you can call us at 319-423-9734. Leave voicemail, leave a text. If we like it, maybe we'll throw it in an upcoming show.
Yeah, and if you don't have something about an upcoming show to say, we just love to hear from people. It's nice when we get a lot of messages that don't make it on the show, just people hitting us up with some ideas or tell us something they got from an episode or an album we might not know about that we should check out. So definitely drop a line. We also love reviews. We love, if you're listening, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever, you can leave a review. Over on the YouTube channel, you can subscribe, leave us some comments, all that stuff.
That's right. And today's episode is brought to you by LR Bags and the AEG1, which we recently reviewed. And we also had Zach Wish do a video on it, which you can find on our YouTube channel. But I had it here for a while at the at PGHQ.
Yeah, you've gotten your hands on that.
I got my hands
guitar,
on it.
Right?
It feels really, really good. Now, naturally, a guitar designed by LR Bags is basically kind of designed to plug in, right? That's kind of their whole deal. So I didn't get a chance to I didn't mic it up or anything, but I played it through an acoustic amp, and it sounds like a really hot acoustic guitar. I mean, it felt really good, and also what I think was important is that it looked cool.
Yeah, it's a cool looking guitar.
It's a cool looking guitar, because sometimes those can be hit or miss as far as the aesthetics. But I think LR Bags checked all the boxes on this one.
Now, let me ask you, since you've actually gotten your hands on the AEG1, how does it feel? Like, it's a pretty thin guitar, right? Does it feel acoustic? Does it feel electric? What's the vibe there?
The one thing I liked about it is that it felt like it was, it was thinner than an acoustic guitar, than say a Dreadnought, let's say. Yeah. But it wasn't so thin that you felt like you were holding a toy, and the neck and stuff didn't feel like, it felt like an acoustic guitar, which is what I would want out of something like that. I wanted to feel as much as possible like an acoustic guitar, and it did. Because sometimes you'll get really thin bodies and really thin necks because they want it to feel like an electric guitar. This wasn't that. This really felt like an acoustic guitar.
Like an electric guitar, not like an acoustic guitar, and that's not the point.
Yes. Yeah. I really like the little sound hole design on it.
Yeah, the sound, cool. Super cool.
So check out the AEG1 from LR Bags, but also go over to the website and check out, they're obviously well known for their pickups, their acoustic pickups, and also their line of pedals, which I think were really cool. They made a whole line of different acoustic guitar centric pedals.
Those are super cool. I've had a chance to check those out. I really like those. And I'll say, in the magazine, when we do our gearboxes and we get an acoustic player, you see LR Bag's name come up a lot.
Yeah.
They're one of the biggest names in amplifying acoustic guitar sounds. And,
that's right.
So the idea that they made a guitar is that's a big deal. It's it's putting all the pieces together.
And
so it's an exciting thing.
What I didn't learn until we just recently did that feature on Lloyd is that he started as a guitar builder.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
So this is kind of full circle for him. So
very cool.
All right. Well, let's get to our episode today. We're talking about Joni Mitchell. Spoiler, we're talking a lot about altered tunings. So if you want to get deeper into that, or have always wanted to know the magic behind it, this is the episode for you. So here's our interview with Taylor Goldsmith from Dawes. All right, Taylor, thank you so much for joining us today, man. How you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man. So great to have you. So great to meet you. Of course, Taylor. We have Taylor here from Dawes. And what's I know Dawes is getting out there on the road. Well, before we jump into talking about Joni, why don't you tell us what's up in Dawes land for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, just we have a big run in April. That's kind of the second half of our headlining run around our last record, which came out in October. Initially, we had like 2 tours about 2 weeks apart, but then and it was all on the books. It was all the venues had been booked, and they weren't announced though. And so when I found out that my wife was pregnant with our third kid, I let everybody know, like, I don't think I could do that first run unless you want me to convince my wife to not be there for the birth of my daughter, which I don't want to do.
Man.
And then we moved it to like February, and then that's right when Griffin's wife turned out to be due for the birth of their kid. So then we moved it to April. So, but it's kind of fun because it gives us a chance to really like marinate on this cycle. Sometimes we put out a record, and then like a month or two later we hit the road, and then within 6 weeks it's done. And then it's just like pick up little like festival runs or opening slots or whatever else. And so for this to be kind of stretched out, I'm psyched. It'll be a fun tour.
Dig it. I just saw you guys last August in one of the more interesting pairings of bands that I can remember, and I know for sure you remember this. It was at a big field in Iowa City, and it was you guys and Corey Wong.
Yeah. It was funny. Fun. It was super fun. It's funny to like. I mean, I remember watching his band get up there and just kill it, and be like, "Wow!" It's fascinating to think how different artists. I mean, it kind of goes without saying, but it bears repeating, I guess. How different artists offer such different experiences. Like with us, I mean, someone else said this to me recently that like, with you guys, it's kind of a review of songs, and they meant it as a compliment, but that could mean some ballads, that could mean some ebbs and flows to the set. And so I remember having a really good show that day. And then when Corey went up there with the horn section and everything is like dancey and everything is fun, everyone was on their feet, and I was like, wow, if this is what everyone came for, then I'm sure Dawes was a little bit disappointing. But we did have a fun time.
That was my first time seeing you guys. I have some friends who are massive fans. And
oh, cool.
They recommended it highly, and so I made sure to get there early. And
oh, sweet.
I think for a lot of times when I go see a band like that, it just like, okay, I'll know 2 or 3 of your songs, by ear or whatever. But then it definitely inspired me to like dig deeper in your catalog.
Oh, cool.
Because you'd come back from a show like that, and maybe you'd have like the chorus in your head, and maybe the name of the song is in that chorus, but not always.
Yeah.
So it's fun to go through like song by song through an album. Nope, not that song. Not that song. That's the one. That's the one I was thinking of. And you make your own. Like I made my own little like.
Oh, that's awesome.
Playlist of that. So that was really cool.
It's very cool.
But I hear what you're saying about Corey's band. That's
they were
high
ripping.
Firepower, man. High Firepower, man. So
yeah.
But we have you today to talk about the queen of altered tunings, Joni Mitchell. And the first thing I want to ask you is, as a songwriter, how much do you dabble in open tunings, or is that a world that you just leave at arm's length?
Well, when I do open, I mean, definitely like I'll do drop D or something, or I'll even do like the opposite drop D where I'll drop the high E and then just playing simple chords like a C open chord all of a sudden has that high D ringing over it. And then as you play other chords, the E minor or G or A7, like all of a sudden the D is doing really fun stuff. So that's a fun thing to do. And then the drop D. But in terms of like fully open tunings, I've only ever messed with the open D tuning. And all the shapes immediately feel like Joni, that it's hard to get away from moves that wouldn't be something that I would hear her doing. Obviously, she went way beyond just the open D tuning. But that's what would happen to me. I would find myself, whether it was like actual bar chord shapes that I've seen her use, or if it was just letting certain strings stay open beneath a shape below, it's like, man, it's just like I keep feeling like I'm sounding like Joni. And so I tend to go back to standard more often. But I mean, when it's done right, and she did it right every time, it's so evocative. Also, like speaking of her open detuning, I am so convinced that is like that belongs to her so specifically that I mentioned this to her. She didn't really give me a yay or nay as to if she had any insight into this, but I remember thinking like, Blood on the Tracks is kind of the big moment for Bob Dylan to start writing in open tuning. Mm-hmm. Also, when you think about what year it is, 1976, I want to say, I've wondered if Tangled Up in Blue is actually a direct reference to her album, and what an inspiration that was for him. And he even, and she was like, oh yeah, okay, huh. Cause that was right. That was right when she was on the Thunder,
the Rolling Thunder.
Rolling Thunder tour for a brief minute. So he was in her presence regularly, kind of like working on those tunes. So anyway, it's definitely a bit far flung, but I like to indulge in those kinds of.
I'm going to say this is breaking news, Nick, right here. We're breaking the news that Tangled Up in Blue was a tribute to Joni.
Yeah,
I think we should just go with it, right?
Yeah, let's just live in that world.
Let's just live in that world. So when did you first become aware of Joni's music? Aside from the guitar playing, when did her music kind of first take hold of you?
It was in two steps. It was like as a kid, it was everything. Well, as a kid, like a senior in high school-ish, around that time when I'm discovering Crosby, Stills and Nash and Neil Young and beginnings of understanding why I love Bob Dylan so much, but very like California focused without even really understanding that they all were part of the same community. That was all when I was like 18, but that was very much the beginner's version. That was like Harvest, Blue, CSN, Nothing Dangerous, but all brilliant. And my education with Joni went from Clouds to Court and Spark and ended there. Like Help Me was it. That was awesome. And then I didn't go beyond it. And then when I was, I want to say like 23 or something, that's when I found Hejira, Hissing of Summer Lawns, Don Juan's Reckless Daughter, Mingus, and all the stuff after Court and Spark. And when I heard Hejira, specifically Hejira, I thought like, this is the best album. This is the best music's ever been. This is just as good as it gets. She's got the depth of like Miles musically. She has the depth of lyrics. She has the depth of Dylan lyrically, and yet she can do both of those things in ways that neither of those guys could do. And then her voice is so beautiful, and the musicians are so incredible on that record, and her and then just the composition and her guitar playing, and and so really to this day, like whenever that record's on, it's just this reminder of like, yeah, this is the best. This is the number one.
As far as the guitar playing goes on that record, what two songs on there would you point to somebody?
I mean, Amelia is a good example of what I was talking about before, of what she can do with just open D tuning, because that she's doing things there that like a big, I guess for people that don't know this, I guess a big part of her journey was she had polio as a little kid. And when she had polio, part of me even wonders if this is even true, but it's become true because she said it. But her hands were so weakened from the disease that she couldn't learn to play regular guitar. I kind of believe that she's just such a genius that wasn't enough for her regular guitar tunings, because even like what she would describe, she would just do these open tunings and they weren't always just like some simple open chord. They were all over the place with suspensions and sevenths and really heady open tunings, and she would then do the bar chord and kind of just or find a smaller shape so let some strings stay open and then just kind of follow it around the guitar. So her left hand was not ever doing very much. It was always in the tuning pegs and in her right hand. And she claimed that was due to polio. I mean, and maybe it's as simple as that. I mean, she knows better than me, but to me, I'm sort of like, is it just because you're better than everybody? Because I feel like she could have handled if it's really hard to play a bar chord. It's really hard to hold your whole finger down across an entire fretboard and move that around a guitar. So if she was strong enough to do that, I feel like she could have played some E majors and G majors. But
anybody who's ever taught a kid how to play a bar chord knows that is actually a lot harder than like standard chord forms.
Yeah,
but I kind of I've always thought about that as like that sort of doesn't make sense on the surface, but then it's like to get to the kind of harmonies that she's hearing, like they are like there's some crazy finger positions they would have to get there. So maybe that's it. It's like the barring plus the fingers to get those extensions or something. I don't know.
And it's wild. Like, you'll see her, whatever it is, like she'll like, if it's something where there's a lot of open ringing strings beneath it, it's still like one shape. Like, her fingers will kind of hit this one shape on a fretboard, and then she'll just kind of start moving that around, and then she'll have one finger in and out for like suspensions. And she loves suspensions. I feel like so many songs just like in on the suspension. But then she I feel like Amelia is this cool example because where it starts, she'll just like play the 4 chord and then do the little suspension to it, but then move it up a step and a half and do it there. And so all of a sudden it's like she's changing the key within the progression, and that's a constant thing of hers too. She's not afraid to change the key for like kind of just a part of a section, and then to hang out in that space and then find her way back to R1. And so like that's a really good example of how powerful that can be from her. Because it's so easy for people that play in open tunings to be like, okay, here's what happens. It's really pretty when I just hit the whole open chord. Here's how I do that little 4 suspension. I could slide that up and do the little pretty 5 suspension with some suspensions in there. And then I'll just kind of go through those things because otherwise it's hard to know where to go. And she was able to make so much out of just what feels so limiting. And then a song like Refuge of the Road, it would be the other example because that really shows like what kind of music she can make when she's just making up her Joni tunings, which I don't think you're going to find in any book other than books about her tunings. I just remember watching when I was learning some of her stuff, she was doing the Magdalene Laundries, and this isn't on Hejira, but it's on Turbulent Indigo, and she was saying in this live performance, it was like a late night thing, or something like that, something where she was talking and performing, but she was saying how she was outside when she was writing that song and she was tuning to the like feeling in the air, like to the seasons, to the time of year. She was like, I was trying to tune to the wind, to the birds. And it's weird coming out anybody else's mouth. I'd be like, this is kind of ridiculous. But with her and with what comes from it, it's like, I totally believe you. And that feels essential to how you arrive at this stuff. It seems like it's so intuitive with her, and there's never like, oh well, I already have an A over here, so I shouldn't do an A flat over there. Like, she's not thinking in those ways. It's very emotionally led.
It's funny you brought that up because Nick and I just read an interview before we recorded. Shout out Acoustic Guitar issue, August 1996.
Yeah.
Because that quote is from that interview where she talks about that tuning. And the tuning is B, F sharp, B, E, A, E for that song, the Magdalene Laundries. And it doesn't really make sense on paper in a way. You know what I mean? But like you said, she just kept turning the tuning pegs until everything resonated for her. And then she's like, that's the tuning. And to go back to one thing you said about her kind of perceived difficulties in playing guitar, I feel like there's probably a crossroads where she either became the Joni Mitchell that we know, or she became like Derek Trucks, and she just put a slide on. You know what I mean? Right. And that seems to be like I would love to hear her talk sometime about where was that spot where she was like, because a lot of people, he said, who have physical, especially when they're very young, have physical difficulties fretting or playing a normal sized guitar, will immediately gravitate towards slide.
Right. That's true. I mean? And I wonder what her relationship is with lead guitar, because I mean, her tunes have solos, but they're never her. And her tunes have soloists. Like, she has Wayne Shorter on almost every record once she met him. But it's never her. And so but then you hear something like Paprika Plains, where she's on piano, and a lot of that is just improvised. And I remember, like, I think it was in her book, she talks about how she was just in the zone that day, and she's like, I just couldn't hit a bad note that I couldn't make music out of. And then they wrote the string arrangement to her improvised piano playing. So she has the ear to go off and to just to explore and be the lead instrumentalist. But with guitar, you won't find a clip of her just all of a sudden like doing a bunch of single note stuff. It's just not her. It's just not her bag.
How much time have you spent on her website looking at her information about her guitar playing?
I didn't know, other than like just like it being helpful with tunings and like getting the actual lyrics right. I didn't know there was anything.
Shout out to whoever runs Joni Mitchell's website.
Yeah,
because
it's
there
really
is an exhaustive database
Yeah.
of what tuning she used. And have you checked out her like tuning notation system? So
it's deep, man.
It's deep. So check this out. So to describe open D, instead of writing D A D F sharp A D, she would write it like this: D75435.
I don't even know how so it would be what you would tune the next string from, basically, like what fret you would tune the next string from.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you get the lowest note right, D. Like for example, Amelia was recorded in open D but in C, right?
Right.
So that tuning would be C75435.
Oh wow, so that's like fascinating.
So you go C or D or whatever the lowest note is, then you go to the 7th fret, you tune the next string to that. 3rd or 5th fret, next string, 4th fret, 3rd fret, 5th fret.
Yeah.
So
that makes total sense now. And also it makes sense knowing that she wasn't a theory head. Like she would never be able to be like, oh, we're playing an A minor, like flat 5, 13 chord there. Like she doesn't talk that way.
But it's interesting
even on piano.
It's interesting how she classifies those tunings, then automatically puts them all into a group together. So like open E, open D, open C are all basically the same tuning. It's just a matter of either a capo position or what's the lowest open string.
Right.
You know what I mean? So then to me, when I discovered that, a lot of these tunings became slightly more approachable. Now, there are some really out ones like X127543, which is CGD capo 1.
Wow.
I mean, and like the fact that somebody took the time not only to organize all this, but to really categorize it like this. And it does, like both sides now is X57545, which is DGDGBE capo 2. And like I've never seen anybody classify tunings like this before. This is entirely her thing.
That's so cool.
Man.
Yeah. It makes, and also like it speaks to the effect too, because when I was like getting into Dylan and like Neil and all that stuff, where they're playing these cowboy chords. I mean, they're incredibly musical and they can surprise you within that, but it's they're playing by rules that I'm familiar with enough to where like, oh, they're going to the minor 6, they're going to do the heavy 7 here for the bridge or whatever, and I can kind of like, I don't need a guitar in my hands to be like, oh, okay, cool, I hear it, I know what they're doing. And with Joni, it could just be like a 1 to 4, and it's still like got so much color in it that like when I hear it, I feel like I'm hearing music for the first time, because like I don't know what she's doing. I don't know what these chords are. I don't even know what their relationship to each other are. Even like the way like jazzers can like understand like what Miles's band or what Steely Dan is doing. It's basically the same thing that I'm talking about with Dylan, but just with more color. Whereas with Joni, it even transcends that. And it kind of goes along with what you're describing about like, there's no one else with that kind of relationship to tuning, and then therefore there's no one who can create that same experience to a listener where they can be like, I'm totally in your hands and I have no context for what's happening musically right now.
I don't know about you guys, but I feel like the place where that is most apparent and the time that became most apparent for me is watching The Last Waltz, because you have all these guys are up there. Bunch of dudes singing blues songs and soul, bluesy rock songs, and it's amazing, and I love so much about it. And then Joni comes up, and it's just a completely different space, and her sound is different. Like her guitar sounds so cool.
That
tone-wise,
effect, is that what
the chord?
She's kind of the originator of that. Like there's been this kind of resurgence with the Mac DeMarcos and War on Drugs, where like these chorus guitars are so satisfying. But you go back to Hijira and Hissing, where she was playing through that Roland Jazz combo amp with the chorus effect built in, and she kind of owns it. It's so cool.
And she gets up there and she does it, and that, I mean, Coyote is, it's an incredible song, and the harmony on that song, and just her vocal delivery and her flow, like what. Whoa, where did this come from? And then it's like, then they go back to, whatever, I don't remember what comes next, but it's like they're back to just like shuffling away and stuff. And you're like, whoa, what? Like it resonates throughout for me, it resonates the rest of the film. You're like, but that Joni Mitchell performance.
Yeah, there's few musicians that like you could make the case that they invented a genre of their own, and I feel like she would kind of be at the top of that list for me. Like other people tend to play by the rules of whatever it is that they fell in love with. And in some cases, those are the best bands of all time. So it's not a knock. But with her, it's like, I don't know what you listened to. I don't know where you're coming from.
Right.
Like you invented the sport that you play. You're the only one playing it. And it's so endlessly inspiring. And on all levels, like even like you mentioned Coyote, like that's 6 minutes long. The choruses don't really repeat. She has that. We get to that line about the freeway at the end every time, but it's like this is, you would not think this is like a lead single, but when it comes from her, you're like, of course, this is this is so it. And there's so many lyrics in a way that any other producer would be like, you have to edit this down. But when it comes from her, it's like, no, it's never enough. Like she could just keep going. She's in the slipstream.
Yeah.
And think back to what you said about those shapes that you would see. Or like, to me, guitar is like one of the most visual instruments. Like any one of us could watch somebody playing on a late night show on mute, and if they're in standard tuning, we can pick out the chords. Whereas watching her play, she's not playing on the same field that we are playing on. You know, because of the tunings or whatever. Like even whatever visual advantage we could have because of recognizable chord shapes, when it comes to Joni's playing, that's out the window. You might get a little bit of a pass if it's like a straight open tuning. There might be some familiar shapes there, especially if she's moving one finger up and down the neck or something. But like you said, she's not playing the same instrument in a way.
And the same goes for the right hand, because like when it's just acoustic guitar, like, and going back to Amelia, when in those intro and re-intro sections, the bong ka ba ba ka, and she keeps clapping the guitar and she would do this like this little kind of bird claw, like which she basically using like her index finger to kind of constantly be raking, and then her thumb to constantly be like kind of jabbing, almost pulling. And I defy any of us to get it right, because it's so like, I mean, we tried when we were learning her songs. There was several of us, competent guitar players that are all like resorting back to finger picking or just kind of a simpler strum, even like with pick, without pick. And with her, like such an integral part of that sound is what she's doing so dynamically with really, like, I mean, she's definitely using the other fingers to pluck on some stuff. Typically it's kind of like her, what's that instrument called? The like tambura kind of thing, where like the notes that are kind of ringing out over every chord, those she's getting with her pinky and her ring finger. But then she just kind of like her pull and her slap with the index finger and the thumb is so special. And it seemed like I mean, of course she was, but it seems like that was something that she was like prioritizing when she would pick later tones. Like, because when she did move into more electric guitar playing, if you just gave me a Tele plugged into a deluxe and I started banging on the pickup with my index finger, it would sound pretty atrocious. And with her, like, she knew kind of where to hit it, what kind of amp, what kind of guitar, to allow that dynamic playing of hers to still breathe and to still like function the way it should. So by the time you're listening to 90s records like Night Ride Home and Turbulent Indigo, she's still doing that extremely percussive guitar playing with her rhythm hand. And it's so satisfying.
Yeah.
My favorite Joni record, and we talked about this on a previous episode, Nick, and I would love to hear, since this is kind of a unique era in her career, is the Shadows and Light stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
And because it's probably, I think Nick and I came to agreement, it's probably the only time that we've seen Pat Metheny play in a band that had like head vocals, like that had like songs, traditional songs, you know what I mean? And that band with Jocko and Pat and those guys, like, it's one of the greatest bands ever assembled.
Yeah.
But I would be interested in you coming from a singer-songwriter perspective. What's your take on like the real heavy jazz stuff that she was doing in the mid to late 70s?
That was always my favorite shit. I mean, Hejira was the beginning of that, and then that leading into Don Juan's record. I mean, Hissing is before it, but even though Hissing is really heavy in a lot of jazz chords, it almost feels like a precursor to Hejira. Like Hejira took it further, and then because of things like Paprika Plains, it seems like Don Juan's took it even further than that, and then finally Mingus when she's making music with Charles Mingus, and all that goes into the Shadows and Light live record / movie. And she's kind of pulling from all that stuff. One thing I always loved about it is that she doesn't make a lot of time for the early shit in that collection. No. It's not like, I remember like having that experience with Radiohead. It's like they didn't go back and play too much bends when they were on their King of Limbs tour. Like they were like, these are the artists we are now. And Joni, I feel like, has that sensibility maybe stronger than just about anybody. And it wasn't like she was, putting on a flowery dress and playing both sides now in the beginning, in the middle of the show for people to kind of get their rocks off to something that happened at that point, like 15 years before or something like that. Maybe like 12. So I always appreciated that. Like she is celebrating where she is at in this moment. And then that band is so fierce. It's the kind of band though, and she seemed to know this better than me, but like it was so perfect for a tour, for a concert experience, not necessarily like, hey, let's start a band and make 5 albums kind of band. Mm-hmm. Like it would, like, I love that show. I love watching it. I've actually watched it more than I've listened to it. But if it were to be like, and then she made 4 albums with Pat Metheny and Jocko, I might be like, well, that sounds, I don't know if I want to hear all that. That sounds really extreme. But for what it is, it's just like, what a perfect cocktail for like to celebrate the end of that thing with her. Because after Mingus, she does get into more of the like 80s sensibilities. She's not like Wayne, I think, is around, but he's not as prominent. Mm-hmm. And Jocko, I think that was the end for Jocko and her. So it's just more 80s records. And then by Night Ride Home and Turbulent Indigo, it's this kind of amalgamation of all the voices of hers that came before it.
When you mentioned the creating a band for now and maybe designing a set list for who you are now, even though there might be fans who want to see her strum and play both sides now, has that influenced you at all, maybe subconsciously with Dawes?
Probably the biggest dose of that I had like firsthand beyond what I was talking about with Shadows and Light was we opened for Bob Dylan in 2013 for a month. And I remember how moved I was and how like fierce and like, this is a funny word to say about a concert, but how artistic it felt. And it made me think of all of our other elder statesmen and stateswomen who were from a time gone by who are still delivering a product on stage. And it felt like, some people, some people were friends that were like, he doesn't sing him the same way. He doesn't play him the same way. I don't like that. And they're entitled to that opinion. They're not wrong. But I know for me and what gets me going, I felt like he has made the decision, consciously or not, that instead of giving us 60% of 1965 like a Rolling Stone, he's giving us 100% of 2013 like a Rolling Stone, or whatever the song is. And that's something that I feel like is what it's like. That's why we love the artists that we love, when we come across people that are so committed, so truly free, and so truly authentic, where they're not even thinking about it. Like, I have to do it this way. It's not an option. That's something that resonates with me strongly. And Joni has that to this day. Like, even when we were, I think it was like night 2 of the Hollywood Bowl, like we were doing some deep tunes of hers, tunes that aren't on the big records, tunes that were on the recent stuff. Like if I had a heart, I'd cry, and I'm forgetting other examples right now, but just, she was like deep in the catalog, and there was only a few moments for like these old blue songs. And night 2, she's like, I'm thinking we should skip Case of You, and like it might have been both sides now. She's like, I want to sing something else, and it's like that's so cool that voice inside of her that's like, be you now, is still as strong as it ever was. And I try to take from it. I think like, you know, I'm not objective, so I know when I'm failing at that in ways that maybe other people wouldn't be aware of or not, or they would, I don't know. But I know it's funny how like whenever I can access that, not for nothing, I always end up liking, whether it's the tour or just or just the song or the record. I like it more because I was true to that concept. I was true to myself in this moment rather than what do people expect of me? Because I feel like in a weird way, the first people that can smell bullshit is your audience, even if they don't even know why. So I and then of course I can later on be like, oh, I did that for the wrong reasons, and now I can see the ramifications of that decision.
Dig it. What I want to wrap up here with a couple of quick questions. You mentioned, as we know, you recently spent some time around Joni with these Hollywood Bowls. Speaking from a guitar perspective, what have you learned guitar wise from being around her in the recent past that you feel like you could have only learned being with her in person?
That's a tough question because she's not playing guitar as much as she was like back in the day with all these videos and albums that we're talking about. The first night we met her, she was handed a guitar and she was detuning to start doing some stuff. And we were all freaking out because it was the first time she'd played guitar since her brain aneurysm. But she eventually put it down. She's like, oh, I'm going to get into that later. But then when we were at the Gorge, I guess 2 years ago now, she did If on guitar and it sounded awesome. And she sang and played it, and it was that old Premier guitar that I remembered from bands like Orgy playing. It was like Orgy and Joni play that model guitar. Yeah. That's Parker, what she plays. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I said Premier, I meant Parker. And yeah, I mean, but watching like, I know I already mentioned this, but watching her claw hammer, like she still has that, and it's still so hers. It's so singular to her. And that was something that was just mind blowing. Anytime she picked up a guitar, like, wow, like nobody else can do that. And I guess that always goes for the people that we love who play guitar. Like I remember, I'm digressing a little bit, but I remember watching this video of Elvis. It was an Elvis Costello thing, but it looked like it was in like a restaurant. It was this tiny little place or tiny bar, and it was definitely Elvis's guitar because it had his whole name across the neck of the jazz master. And then Jerry Garcia was there, and Elvis takes off his jazz master and hands it to Jerry, and I'm thinking in my head of like Elvis's tone. And I'm like, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to sound right with Jerry Garcia playing the Elvis Costello Jazz Master. And then they go into a song and Jerry starts playing, and right away it sounds exactly like Jerry Garcia's rig. Exactly. And it's just this reminder that these great guitar players that we love and these sounds that we chase so much of the time, I know it's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. The sounds, these tones of these masters it's in their fingers. It's not in their guitar. It's not in their amp. I mean, maybe some effects or something here and there, but it's really just in the way they hit their instrument. And Jerry's going to sound like Jerry on Elvis Costello's Jazz Master, and Joni's going to sound like Joni, literally picking up anything because that's the sound that she makes when she holds a guitar.
Well, Taylor, thank you so much for hanging with us. What before we split though, I know we talked about Dawes a little bit. Going forward, we're going to see you guys out on tour. Where can people go to find out more?
We're always cooking up new songs. Our 9th record was last October, so hopefully get that big 10 out there sooner than later.
All right, so thanks to Taylor for coming on. Man, anytime, certain artists, you get talking about them, I just get excited. I want to listen more.
Yeah.
And so there's so much Joni content, so much stuff to listen to, so many videos to watch. There's great interviews you mentioned where she's talking about her tuning. There's just so much out there. And this was an episode that definitely like got me pumped up about Joni's music.
Yes. And to also explore like some altered tunings,
Man. Always a good idea.
Always a good idea. I'm very like I can do open D, open G, open E, those kind of things. But when it gets to the more adventurous ones, I think I might go look on that database on her website and be like, okay, what's the most adventurous one that has the most songs written in it?
Yeah.
And start there and see.
A couple months ago, I went and learned some songs in the tuning, which I rarely do, just to get a feel. I had been listening to some maybe Hijira or something, and I wanted to see what it felt like to play some of those tunes that way. And it is a different experience. I totally recommend it, because even if it's not like, I think sometimes some people, and I know this just from teaching students who'd be interested in alternate tunings, or who wouldn't be interested in alternate tunings but want to learn some song in an alternate tuning, it's like you have to do all this work just to play this one song, and it becomes something really easy to just like not get around to. Maybe you learn it and you just move on. Even if that's the case, I think there's value in doing that, because it's, you could figure out one of her songs and come up with like a simplified harmony, figure out how to play just like, the main triads, or, maybe some seventh chords to get through it, but you're not getting the full harmonic experience. But you go into the tuning and you do the voicings, even if you're not, maybe you're even arranging it for standard tuning, but having the physical experience of connecting with that sound and connecting with the way it feels to play that, you never know what's going to come from that. I get super inspired from that, even if I don't use that tuning for something else. Just the actual feel of like the way strings resonate together can be really inspiring. So I think that's something about Joni's music that is going to always be basically endlessly inspiring.
Yes. Yeah. And her tuning notation, I guess you could call it, how she thinks of intervallically or fret wise the tunings.
That was a big revelation for me.
That
when
was
you hipped me to that.
Yes, that will be very interesting to try and mess. And it gives you a way to think about those tunings in relation to other tunings, so each one doesn't feel like its own separate universe. I think that's the key.
Yeah. Exactly.
You don't have to, even though in altered tunings you are kind of reinventing the playground, let's say, of standard, of we know so much about standard tuning on the fretboard, that relating these different tunings to other tunings that you might know better will help you put some more chords together. So
I'll say one more thing about that too, that I've gone personally on my own journey. I've gone through some almost extreme alternate tuning phases. I got into like 12 string stuff with crazy tunings and all that. When you start doing it, it becomes much less daunting. As soon as you like start moving around a little bit, it's like, it's not as, frustrating to just like keep changing the tuning on your guitar. You just get used to it. So like, you might as well give it a shot, change your tuning a couple times. It just becomes like anything else. You just start jumping around.
And the point is, it's for different things. Like, I would not show up to a cover band gig in an altered tuning, although I know people who have and who do that. That's not for me. I would want an altered tuning for just a different sound. I wouldn't be like reading music in an altered tuning. That to me is specifically standard tuning.
I went through a phase where I was trying to read in cello tuning. I was reading Bach cello pieces in cello tuning. And I was really like, I got something out of that, much like what I'm saying about learning Joni. Like, I got something out of it. I would be starting at zero again if I tried to do that today. But
don't do that. Don't. It's.
I will say it hipped me to some stuff about the cello that like I don't really need to know. But fingering wise, like those Bach pieces on cello, you learn them on guitar. There's some challenging stuff on there, and then on cello, I mean, it's still not that it's not challenging to do it right, but just like made so much more sense, like voicings, and because of course they did.
Yeah.
Like, wow, I learned so much just from doing this. Anyway, it's insight. You gain insight.
All right. What are we listening to this week? I went first last week. You're going first this week.
Okay. So I have one I'm super duper excited about. I don't know if you remember this. A few years ago, maybe like 7 or 8 years ago at this point, when I was freelancing for Premier Guitar before I was here full time as an editor, I wrote a piece on one of my favorite guitar players and one of my favorite musicians, Iblis Alvarez, from the band the Meridian Brothers and Los Piranhas. And Iblis in my opinion, he's a total genius. Meridian Brothers is, despite the name, that is his solo project. He plays everything on those records, or primarily plays everything. There might be guests here and there, but it's not a brother band. It's actually just him. Those records are just so creative and sonically like so interesting and so innovative. And then Los Piranhas is his guitar trio band. So it's instrumental, guitar, bass, drums. Iblis is they're based in Colombia. The band is based in Colombia. And there's lots of really cool like cumbia sounds that are incorporated in this. But the thing about the way he plays is he uses a couple pedals. If you go find on premierguitar.com, you can find the piece I did with him where he outlines his rig. He does use a couple cool pedals, like he has a pedal board, but maybe most of his sound comes from running his guitar through Max MSP, and he's a studied composer and sound designer.
Hold on, through what? Through Max
MSP, like
What's
the
that?
sound design / whatever. I don't exactly know the best way to describe it. In short, it's a computer program,
like a plug-in type thing.
No, it's its own language
Okay.
and interface. This is terrible because I play with people who use Max MSP. I think it can kind of do anything. I've always been a little intimidated by it because it's like, I think you can learn it on your own, but I think a lot of people learn it in college and take a class on it. But it's like a sound design programming language, and you can create basically any type of sound in Max MSP. So a lot of people use it just as an instrument in and of itself for electronic music. Some people run drum machines through it, or you can build a drum machine in it. Iblis runs his guitar through it and has, in my opinion, the craziest guitar sounds. His tones are amazing. And Los Piranhas, to me, it's rooted in this cumbia vibe, like, traditional music with these like futuristic sounds on the guitar. But you hear it, it sounds like a guitar. He's just using like really crazy tones. And so Los Piranhas have a new record. Every time these guys have they put out one every couple years. Every time they put out a record, I am super duper excited, and this is no exception. I'm not gonna the title is not in English. We'll put the cover up here, but I'm not gonna try and say the name. If you just go to LOS piranhas.bandcamp.com, these guys are amazing. I think for guitar music, this is one of the most exciting things going. So I since this album came out, it has not left my rotation.
Dig it. All right, that's a good one. We'll put links to all these down in the thing below here. You can check it out. We'll put links to the Bandcamp. Nick, did you ever study classical guitar in college?
I took classical guitar lessons for about a year. Yeah.
So as did I. I was in college. I was studying jazz and classical guitar. And to me,
I didn't know that.
The thing I got the most out of classical guitar were two things. One was melody, because when you're playing Bach or Albanias or Soar, there's just a certain heightened sense of melody in some of those pieces. And two, your touch on a classical guitar.
Yeah.
Spoiler, not a classical. I would never call myself a classical guitar player. However, I came across this record by this guitar player named Noel Johnston, and he sent this to me. He's written some lessons for me, and he sent this to me when it came out. It came out in 2023, and it's him playing Bach's Partita No. 1 in B minor, BWV 1002, and it's an 8-piece, I don't know what to call them, movements, I guess, sections of the partita. Partita.
I say partita, doesn't mean that's right.
Right. But he does it all on a Telecaster.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which reminds me that the same, and when I listen to this back, his tone is I mean, it's this huge clean tone, and I think it's a blend of like a Kemper and a mic'd up amp, I think, when I asked him. And what it reminded me of was how when you hear a really great classical guitar player and they have that touch of how to bring that sound out of the instrument, how that can be translated to electric guitar. And this to me is an incredible example. Also, I think he arranged them in such a way where he tried to use as many open strings as possible.
Oh, nice. That's
cool.
Know,
when you see videos of him playing it, it doesn't look like, and I haven't compared it to like what like a legit classical transcription would be, but it seemed like he was, because the best thing about guitar are the open strings. That should be a tagline.
Can't argue there.
And for him to do that and really make a point, from my ears, what it tells me is that he made a point to use as many open strings as possible. It's a study in 1, melody, 2, touch and feel, and 3, being able to arrange a piece of music that's whatever, hundreds and hundreds of years old in a new, interesting way for an instrument that is a fairly young instrument, the guitar, especially electric guitar. So I would highly recommend tracking down Noel Johnston's records. I believe it's on iTunes and Spotify. It's Johann Sebastian Bach Partita number 1 in B minor, BWV 1002.
And just to say, talk about inspiring things to get into your fingers. Even if you're going to do nothing with Bach as a songwriter, or you think you're not going to like it doesn't relate to the type of music you write, the type of music you usually play, any of that stuff.
Right.
Playing Bach pieces reveals so much about music that it doesn't matter what you think you're going to do or how it's always worth it. As a teacher, I many times just tried to convince people to learn 1 or 2, just to see what it does for you. There's always something there to get out of it. So that's, to hear some Bach pieces on electric guitar, always cool to hear how people interpret that. So I'm going to check that one out.
Dig it. All right. Thanks again to LR Bags. Make sure to go check out the AEG 1. Go try it out. Try out their pedals, their pickups, anything you get your hands on. Also, thank you to Taylor Goldsmith, who many say has the best hair in rock, and it was on full display, as you saw in this episode. But yeah, thanks again for sitting down and talking about Joni Mitchell with us, Taylor.
Yeah, and don't forget, you're listening, you want to get at us, reach out, give us some feedback, hit us at 100guitarists@premierguitar.com. And the phone number is 319-423-9734. That's our voicemail line. Nobody will answer. You don't have to worry about talking to either one of us. Just leave us a voicemail or send us a text. Tell us what you think. And rate, review, all that stuff. And if we don't hear from you, we'll see you next time.
All right. See you next week.